The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., February 6, 2023. I hereby appoint the Honorable Marionette Miller Meeks to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the House of January 9, 2023, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties with time equally associated between the parties of each member and other than the majority and the minority leaders and the minority whip are limited to 5 minutes, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 1:50 p.m. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Joyce, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise to address the House and ask to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, tomorrow evening, President Biden will deliver his second State of the Union address and attempt to defend his failed agenda, an agenda that has led to high inflation, crumbling supply chains, and worst of all, an open southern border that has led to far too many deaths from drugs like fentanyl. We've seen reckless government spending drive the price of household goods out of reach for so many families. We've seen businesses forced to shut down assembly lines because of ridiculous vaccine mandates that led to critical components rusting in our ports, instead of arriving at time in factories in Pennsylvania. As we stand in this body today, the #1 killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 49 is fentanyl poisoning. We need the President to show that he is willing to work with Congress to address the crisis that his administration has caused. We need to cut spending. We need to slow inflation. We need to see that real American families have an administration that is listening to them. We need to end the public health emergency that has led to a shortage of healthcare workers. And we need to finally see a plan to address the crisis that we all recognize at our southern border. Just 2 weeks ago, parents from Franklin County, Pennsylvania, Ray and Deb Collin, came before the Energy and Commerce Committee and told the story of their son, Zach, who lost his life to fentanyl poisoning just a few short months ago. It's time for President Biden to address this crisis that has killed thousands of men, women, and children across Pennsylvania and offer to us a concrete solution to secure our border and put a stop to these needless American deaths. American families are struggling, and so far, we've seen shockingly few attempts from the Biden administration to confront kitchen table issues that face every American. Pennsylvanians do not need a Green New Deal-focused EPA that threatens to take away their gas stoves. Families in my district do not need more government handouts that only raise the price of groceries, gas, cars, and housing, and continue to grow our national debt. What Americans need tomorrow night here in this chamber are answers. We can't afford another year of emptiness, and we cannot afford another year of President Biden's failed policies. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield.
The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I request permission to revise my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on January 13th, the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, announced that the United States had hit its debt ceiling, which is a legal authorization that Congress has done on a recurring basis since the early 1900s. That, again, allows our Treasury to go out and sell bonds so that we can pay the bills for our country, whether it's fentanyl issues or whether it's our military, whether it's our education programs. Normally, when a Secretary of the Treasury gives that type of an announcement, responsible leadership in Congress takes up the task of extending the debt ceiling so that, again, our government can continue to function. We are talking about paying the bills for existing budgets that have already been passed. That's what the debt ceiling is directed and empowers by Congress moving forward. Well, it's been 18 days since Mrs. Yellen's warning to the country and to the world, and the leadership of the House has done absolutely nothing. We have passed a series of pointless resolutions that have no legal impact in terms of real lives of people in this country, and a bunch of bills that we know are immediately dead on arrival in the Senate. So again, as the clock ticks, the world wants to know, what's the Speaker's position? What does he want in terms of doing what, again, every speaker, Republican and Democrat, have done over and over again to protect the full faith and credit of our currency and the paper that the Treasury sells, again, as basically the gold sterling in terms of financial markets across the world? Well, Mr. McCarthy has not told us. So what's at work here? Well, if we look at the Republican Study Group, which consists of roughly about 170 members, they've been talking openly and publicly about the fact that they want to do entitlement reform, which is to go after Social Security and Medicare. Well, I would just say, Madam Speaker, that this is a very off-target proposal and solution because, in fact, Social Security has no bearing in terms of the operating deficit of the federal government, which, again, the Speaker claims that he cares so much about. Social Security is funded through a separate revenue stream, the payroll tax that comes out of working people's paychecks every single pay period that goes into a fund that, again, is separate and distinct from the operating budget of the federal government. So, again, the proposals of the Republican Study Group, which is to raise the retirement age from 67 to 70, to impose a degraded level of CPI, cost of living adjustment, change CPI, would hit middle-class Americans hard, particularly younger ones, because this is definitely proposed as a sort of a two-tiered Social Security system. But there's a fundamental flaw in the whole approach that's being suggested and discussed by the Republican Study Conference, which is the claim that the Medicare and Social Security systems are entitlements. Entitlement is not a legal term. It's not a budget term. It's a political term. It's an attempt to try and mask the fact that Social Security, since Franklin Roosevelt signed it into law 80 years ago, is a social insurance program. And if you don't believe me, then look at your paycheck, because what your paycheck shows is that the withholding for Social Security is separate from your federal taxes, which goes into the operating budget of this country, and is designated as the Federal Insurance Contribution Act, FICA, for old age insurance. Again, it is an insurance program, and it provides coverage for people who are retired because they've hit retirement age, for young people who've lost a parent, or for people on disability. And again, if we were responsible about trying to deal with the fact that Social Security is going to be challenged in 2033, it's going to have a shortfall. It's not going to go bankrupt, which the press sometimes says. There's a solution to that, which is to lift the earnings cap, which today, basically, anyone who earns income above $160,000 suddenly doesn't have to pay into the Social Security system. So as Warren Buffett, a billionaire, aptly pointed out, he's paying less into Social Security than his secretary. It's called the Buffett rule. And a solution which basically says everybody pays the same rate, or at least people whose income is above $400,000, would overnight push back the solvency for decades to ensure that people, young people in particular, are going to have a Social Security just like all the Americans in the preceding 80 years have had, that is really one of the pillars of middle-class economic security. So in the meantime, the clock is ticking. We know that we are really not going to just go at the debt ceiling, but are actually going to hit full default by June 1st. This leadership has to do the right thing, just like we have done in past presidents and past Congresses. Extend the debt ceiling.
Time has expired.
I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to revise on this term.
The gentleman is recognized.
How much more for Ukraine? Is there any limit? Which billionth dollar really kicks in the door? Which red line we set will we not later cross? China reminds us that we have real issues. China began its offensive against our homeland, infiltrating our universities, stealing our innovations, buying off our politicians, surveilling our citizens, all the while capturing the loyalty of America's most powerful corporations. China's influence is overtaking ours, even in our own hemisphere. Our conflict with China may turn very hot very soon. Many believe we are currently in the window of a possible invasion of Taiwan. If not deterred, such an invasion would immediately make life worse for virtually every American. But tomorrow, President Biden will tell us how much more we must do for Ukraine. Look around your house. How much stuff is made in Ukraine, or even Russia, for that matter? Next to China, if you're watching this speech on a smartphone, you're likely using Taiwanese technology. So why Ukraine? A country that just rounded up dozens of senior leaders in its government over overt corruption. Perhaps the answer is as simple as the Hunter Biden life motto: a grifter's got a grift. But the amount of money we now pour into Ukraine makes Burisma's wildest dreams of wealth through Biden family influence seem meek by comparison. Defense contractors need there to be a war going on somewhere, whether the arms end up in the hands of ISIS, the Taliban, the Azov battalion, or on the black market. They get rich in the business of weapons supply, but only when there is weapons demand. A serious nation would never let foreign interests abroad or special interests here at home dictate its foreign policy. The interests of our countrymen must morally compel our greater attention. And as the war slogs on in Ukraine, the benefits to Americans are unclear. Bandits in the Sinaloa Mountains hurt more Americans than the men in Crimea. But foreigners come to Washington to lecture us about spending our constituents' money on a conflict thousands of miles away. And my colleagues are eager to oblige. On this floor, Zelensky's demands got bipartisan standing ovations from most. Stingers, HIMARS, tanks. At first, we said no to all of these things. President Biden even said that some of these things might lead to World War III. And then yet we sent all of them. F-16s are likely still. Lockheed Martin sure is confident that Ukraine will get F-16s. They told the Financial Times recently that they are already ramping up production. Create demand, provide the supply. This is escalating, and we are placing trust in leaders who do not deserve trust. John Kirby, the Pentagon spokesman, who assured us that the Afghan military would withstand the Taliban offensive, now says that there is no risk that Putin will go nuclear. The risk of miscalculation in Ukraine is much, much higher than getting it wrong in Afghanistan. A nuclear war between Russia and the United States would end human life as we know it. And yet Biden is doing everything possible to provoke such a disaster. And for what? The actions we are taking are not going to end the war in Ukraine. In fact, we are probably prolonging the killing. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians will die this year because Congress feels good when it sends instruments of death and billions in cash. Many dollars sent for the war in Afghanistan ended up in bank accounts in Switzerland and Dubai. To where will we trace the bounty of Ukrainian grift? This war could end tomorrow if we pursued negotiation, but Biden refuses. Not only do we arm the Ukrainian military, we pay their politicians' salaries. The $113 billion in aid included funding the Ukrainian government. We can and must push for peace. You don't really hear that from many people these days, with the exception of President Trump. Trump is right to recognize that we are on the brink of World War III and that immediate action for peace is necessary to stop disaster. Unfortunately, there is a bipartisan coalition working to continue the war. When Elon Musk proposed a peace plan, Nikki Haley attacked him, saying we, quote, shouldn't push our weight on them. That is, of course, nonsense. We've pushed billions of dollars on them. We can simultaneously pressure North Korea and China from supplying Russia.
The gentleman's time has
And
expired.
ought to do so. Thank you. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, for 5 minutes.
Request unanimous extent to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
The Chinese Communist Party obviously believes that they can invade America's airspace deliberately, notoriously, and without serious consequences. They even believe, and this shows their hubris, their gall, that they can announce that they reserve the right to retaliate against America for shooting down their spy balloon. And you know what? After 26 years in this House, I would say the Chinese Communist Party is probably right. They did it, they hit us, and they can probably get away with it. Because the two parties will compete about who can scream the greatest invective toward Beijing. Then the two parties will attack each other, saying, well, what did President Trump do? And what did President Biden do? And in the end, we'll have nothing but bruised partisan vocal cords. I've seen for 26 years the Beijing-Wall Street axis control our policy toward China. Now, this is just a balloon, but it is on top of two enormous problems with China. One is the lopsided trade relationship, where they prohibit us from exporting to them and impose higher tariffs on them than we impose on us. And the second was the obfuscation and lack of cooperation of China when COVID arose on their territory. But we probably will not have meaningful retaliation for those great harms and the most recent one, because Wall Street has been in control of this House since the day in the year 2000 when we granted most favored nation status to Beijing and let them into the World Trade Organization. Before that, China was an annoyance, a slumbering giant. Since then, the Chinese Communist Party has done untold damage to our people, to their people, and, of course, to our economy and national security. There are two things Wall Street will not let us do. Two things China would actually try to avoid, and that is dealing with Taiwan and trade. So I have three proposals. I will look forward to working with anyone on either side of the aisle to turn this into good legislation. First, Congress should provide that we automatically allow Taiwan to buy certain defense items and that we act expeditiously at the congressional level without waiting for the administration to allow the Seahawk helicopters and other necessary defense items to go to Taiwan. Second, and this arises from my years as chairman of the Investor Protection Capital Markets Subcommittee, we need to require all major corporations to disclose as a risk factor to their investors how they would be affected by an end of the U.S.-China economic relationship or a major impediment to it. Investors deserve the information, and we need corporations to compete for capital by showing that they've made themselves more resilient. And if our companies are more resilient, our economy is more resilient. Third, we need to provide that we immediately end most favored nation status to China if they blockade or invade Taiwan. This has to be immediate and certain and known in Beijing before they launch their invasion. And it is not immediate and it's certain unless we provide no executive branch waiver. Finally, a fourth proposal, and that is we need to provide an immediate 20% tariff on all Chinese goods if they retaliate against us for implementing any of those first three proposals. And if they retaliate against that retaliation, we have to be ready to go beyond that. We can act. We can act with regard to Taiwan. We can act with regard to trade. We can act with regard to a country that has built the most lopsided trading relationship in the history of international trade. and whose actions have turned the industrial Midwest into what we now refer to as the Rust Belt, which has led to a decline in real wages for those without a college education for over 25 years, leading to fentanyl and a host of other problems. So we can act. The question is, can we overcome the Wall Street-Beijing axis? Can we deal with the partisanship here? Or will this balloon just go over our heads and lead once again to partisan vituperation? I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Santos, for 5 minutes. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, today I rise to honor a former volunteer firefighter who was at Ground Zero on 9/11, Michael Weinstock. He was an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn Special Victims Bureau and a volunteer firefighter and an EMT. On the morning of 9/11, Michael witnessed the black smoke billowing out of the World Trade Center, and without thought, he voluntarily rode with first responders to help in any way he could. Michael had been unloading medical equipment out of an ambulance when the South Tower crumbled and nearly crushed Michael to death. Today, Michael suffers from a painful and incurable disease, neuropathy. Michael has been a strong advocate for neuropathy to be covered by the World Trade Center Health Program. Neuropathy is a medical condition that results in damage to the nerves outside the brain and spinal cord. Those who suffer from neuropathy experience weakness, numbness, which typically occurs in hands or feet. This can be incredibly painful and debilitating, and many are unable to live normal lives. This is also known as the suicide disease, due to limited effective treatments and that there is no cure. Studies have linked neuropathy with the 9/11 dust, a study that was published by the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. The data from the 2019 study found that nearly 10,000 firefighters and emergency medical workers were exposed to toxins at the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center Health Program covered conditions categories include acute traumatic injuries, airways and digestive disorders, cancers, mental health conditions, to name a few. In 2016, the World Trade Center Health Program was petitioned to add peripheral neuropathy to its list of covered conditions, which it declined to do. In 2017, the FDNY responder again petitioned the program to add peripheral neuropathy to its covered conditions list. Unfortunately, the World Trade Center Health Program declined to update its list a second time, citing insufficient evidence. Michael's story is one of many that have yet to be told to a wider audience. This issue goes beyond the political pale of Republicans versus Democrat. As a member of the 118th Congress, I would like to use this opportunity to raise awareness of what the men and women who suffer from this debilitating disease due to the exposure of the toxins from the World Trade Center. Since the World Trade Center Health Program does not cover neuropathy, people like Michael must pay out of pocket for treatment, medications, and other medical needs. I ask my colleagues that we work together and find a solution and have conditions such as neuropathy be covered under the World Trade Center Program Act. Tomorrow, I'm proud to have Michael as my guest for the State of the Union address, and I'm proud to be his member as he is a constituent of the 3rd Congressional District. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until 2 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? God, you are our refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of trouble. We offer our prayers today, asking that you provide the people of Turkey and Syria who are in the throes of the unfathomable devastation of today's earthquake refuge from this disaster and strength to endure its indiscriminate destruction. Be their rock, even as the earth still crumbles beneath them. Shelter them under your wings until this disaster passes. Erase the divide of politics and past hatred by the rescue efforts and humanitarian aid of their neighboring countries. And then from the rubble, may there emerge the shared responsibility we each have as humans, one for another, in times of suffering. Embrace in your arms all who have lost loved ones this day, and uphold those who are still awaiting news of those not yet rescued. In the midst of this tragedy, grant each of them the certainty of your abiding spirit. May their fears be relieved, though the earth should change, their uncertainties assuaged, though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea. For you, O Lord, are their refuge and their strength, a very present help in these times of trouble. In the hope to be found in you and in the promise of your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Admiral. The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands as approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is agreed on to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands as approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including our guests in the gallery, please join in.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The chairman will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address our body for 1 minute, please.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, sir. I rise today to address the most critical national security threat our nation is facing today, the Chinese Communist Party and their invasion of our U.S. airspace. The recent Chinese surveillance balloon was allowed to fly unchecked from one end of our country to the other, reaffirming that the CCP is the top threat to our national security. I am beyond outraged at the fact that this administration has allowed this to happen. Was he asleep behind the wheel of his Corvette? Unfortunately, that does seem to be the case, because this did not just occur for hours, it went on for days. At the hands of this administration, the CCP was allowed to invade our airspace, and it happened right over our district, right over Whiteman Air Force Base, home of the B-2 stealth bomber. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, I will not back down until we get answers. We cannot allow China to walk all over us and outpace us militarily. This administration continues to project weakness on the world stage, and it must end. We need answers. We must have a plan to stop the Chinese Communist Party's clear and blatant military aggression. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Speak for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I have the distinct honor today to commend the Pinole Valley High School Spartans football team upon winning the 2022 Division VII California State Championship. This outstanding achievement marks the first high school state football title secured by the West Contra Costa Unified School District. This accomplishment would not have been possible without the tireless dedication of the Pinole Valley players, coaches, parents, students, and educators. The Spartans' unwavering commitment to their craft and their remarkable teamwork represents the very best of our students, athletes, and schools. This championship title demonstrates both the talents of the team and their discipline. They exemplified the character, steadfastness, and capability that is cultivated at the Pinole Valley High School. On behalf of the constituents of California's 8th Congressional District, I congratulate the Pinole Valley High School Spartans football team for achieving this championship title and reassert my continued support and pride for all of our student athletes. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The catastrophic Chinese spy balloon spectacle clearly threatened American families from Alaska to Missouri to North Carolina to my home community in South Carolina with Fort Jackson and the Savannah River site. This confirms that President Biden and Vice President Harris should resign. My call for their resignation was valid in August 2021 due to the surrender and disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan with 13 dead, creating a safe haven for terrorists to attack American families. It was not political in 2021 when the succeeding president, then Speaker Nancy Pelosi, would have been a Democrat. Now in 2023, with Speaker Kevin McCarthy a Republican. It's irrelevant for American families which party is in power because the first criteria of a leader should be their capability, regardless of party, and sadly, Biden and Harris are failures. Resignation now is further reinforced by their open border policies, having allowed hundreds of identified terrorists into America to commit mass murder. When the domestic attack occurs, Biden and Harris will not be able to adequately respond. Credible leadership is imperative to protect American families. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The College for All mentality failed our country's students. It failed students who paid or borrowed for degrees with no return on their investment. It failed workers who lacked the skills to succeed in their field. It failed business owners who are left with open positions they can't fill. And it failed entire industries suffering from a widening skills gap. That is why I co-sponsored the Promoting Employment and Lifelong Learning Pell Act. The Pell Act will allow students to use Pell Grants for high-quality, short-term education programs, creating even more pathways to the American dream. Instead of financing an expensive diploma, students will obtain in-demand skills so they can be successful in the workforce. This is the right path forward for post-secondary education. I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the great state of Iowa seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Annie Palmer of Indianola, who received the Grow Your Future Award from the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation. Each year, the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation offers the Grow Your Future Award to young Iowans who work in agriculture to help grow their businesses. Last year, Annie submitted her business, Hader Acres, which raises Berkshire hogs and Navajo churro sheep for their meat and wool. After several rounds of voting, Annie was selected as a finalist, which involved a pitch-off to determine which award she would receive. At the end of the conference, Annie went home with $2,500, which she plans to put toward building a new shed for lambing or farrowing. I also want to thank the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation for hosting this annual competition to financially support the next generation of Iowa farmers. This competition has been a great way to recognize young farmers to get into the agricultural business and grow the farming community in Iowa. Congratulations to Annie and the rest of the winners of this year's Grow Your Future Award. I look forward to seeing your businesses produce. Thank you, and I yield back.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on February 2, 2023 at 4:50 p.m. that the Senate passed Senate 223, that the Senate agreed to House Concurrent Resolution 11, appointments, Senate trustee to the James Madison Memorial Fellowship Foundation, Canada-U.S. Interparliamentary Group Conference during the 118th Congress, Board of Regents of the Smithsonian Institution, Board of Trustees of the Harry S. Truman Scholarship Foundation, Congressional Executive Commission on the People's Republic of China, Canada-U.S. Interparliamentary Group Conference during the 118th Congress, Board of Regents of the Smithsonian Institution, Washington's Farewell Address. Signed sincerely, Cheryl L. Johnson, Clerk.
The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Under Clause 2G of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, I herewith designate Ms. Lisa P. Grant, Deputy Clerk, Mr. Kevin F. McCumber, Deputy Clerk, and Ms. Cheryl H. Mueller, Director of Personnel, to sign any and all papers and perform all other acts for me under the name of the Clerk of the House for which they would be authorized to do by virtue of this designation, except such as are provided by statute. In case of my temporary absence or disability, this designation shall remain in effect for the 118th Congress or until modified by me. Signed sincerely, Cheryl L. Johnson, Clerk of the House.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess subject to the call of the Chair.
The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection, pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on the postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 548, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Historic Lands Reacquisition Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 548, bill to take certain federal lands in Tennessee into trust for the benefit of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, and the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Fernandez, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 548, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection. For what purpose? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 548, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Historic Lands Reacquisition Act, introduced by my friend from Tennessee, Congressman Fleshman. H.R. 548 places approximately 96 acres of Tennessee Valley Authority land and permanent easements into trust along the shores of the Little Tennessee River and Tellico Reservoir in Monroe County, Tennessee, for the benefit of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. These areas include the Sequoia Museum of Chota Memorial, the Tennessee Memorial, and land to support these properties and cultural programs. The parcels placed into trust under the bill will primarily be used to memorialize and interpret the history of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians is one of 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes and is the only federally recognized tribe in North Carolina. Their ancestral homeland includes substantial parts of 7 eastern states, including Tennessee. The 57,000-acre Qualla Boundary is the name of the Cherokee Indian Reservation in North Carolina. In 1979, after the completion of the Tellico Dam by the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, the tribe approached the TVA about lands that are of historical significance to the tribe that were impacted by the dam. The tribe and the TVA informally agreed to allow the tribe to manage 2 easements in 1984 and 1986, including the Sequoia Museum. H.R. 548 helps this cause by transferring approximately 76 acres of historically significant lands from the TVA to the U.S. government to be held in trust for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. It also places 2 permanent easements over TVA property to be held in trust for the tribe to create recreational trails between the sites. This legislation will give the Eastern Band greater control over the historic homelands and the opportunity to memorialize the history and culture of the Cherokee people. Gaming pursuant to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act would be prohibited, and the bill also ensures that the TVA will be able to continue its river control and development activities to power the Tennessee Valley region. I urge adoption of the measure, and I commend the gentleman from Tennessee for his continued work on this important legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from New Mexico is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, I would first like to start by thanking the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee as well as the sponsor of the bill for bringing this bill to the floor of the House today. These bipartisan bills affecting Native American tribes and nations in our country are very important and very significant for the tribes that are seeking land into trust recognition. And this bill itself is an example of how the various agencies and local entities within Tennessee work together to come up with a compromise and with a bill that can be supported by all. I look forward to having these bills actually get signed into the law as they have passed in Congress this past. As noticed, H.R. 548 is the Eastern Band of Cherokee Historic Lands Reacquisition Act, introduced by Representative Fleischman of Tennessee. And we noted that it is intended to take lands and easements into trust for use and benefit of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Nation. As we pointed out, these include the Sequoia Museum, the Chota Memorial, the Tennessee Memorial, and land to support these properties and cultural programs. And we remember that the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians is one of 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes and is the only federally recognized tribe in North Carolina. The ability of the tribe to take these land into trust and then to be able to use them to preserve their cultural ties to the land is really significant. The 2 bills that we are considering on the floor have significance beyond the acres themselves. Because they are an outgrowth of an evolving United States policy to Native American governments. The United States has moved from an era where it systematically pushed Native Americans off their ancestral lands into ever smaller territories of reservation land. And we are seeing now the reverse of that as we move to take land into trust for the Eastern Band of Cherokees. I support the bill, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from New Mexico reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fleischman.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 548, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Historic Lands Requisition Act. I thank the chair and the distinguished ranking member both for their very kind words of support for this very important legislation. This legislation has passed in this House before. It needs to pass tonight. It needs to go to the Senate. It needs to be on the President's desk. It is far too long. The Eastern Band of Cherokee have been waiting and had a lot of promises made to them over the years which have been broken. This is a great bill for America, and it's a great bill that we honor our wonderful Eastern Band Cherokees. The great state of Tennessee, my home state, gets its name from the historic Overhill Cherokee settlement called Tanasi, located in present-day Monroe County, Tennessee. Tennessee served as the capital of the Cherokee people from as early as 1721. Unfortunately, as a result of misguided federal policies, the Cherokee people were forcibly removed from their homes in Tennessee and the surrounding states. This tragic period in American history led to the Trail of Tears, a journey on which the United States forcibly marched 15,000 Cherokees to the Indian Territory. My bill, the Eastern Band Cherokee Historic Lands Reacquisition Act, returns important historic sites back to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the tribal nation comprised of descendants of those Cherokees who resisted removal in the Great Smoky Mountains and escaped the Trail of Tears. It is on these same lands where the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians have for decades honored the birthplace of Sequoyah, whose likeness we all have the opportunity to pass as we make our way from the rotunda of our Capitol to this House floor. H.R. 548 would return 76.1 acres, and I want to be very clear, it's only 76.1 acres of TVA land back to the Eastern Band of Cherokees in trust, and grant 2 permanent easements over TVA property to be held in trust for the tribe for creating recreational trails between the sites. The tribe is committed to improving the educational resources of the Sequoyah Birthplace Museum and to provide means for economic development for the local community through cultural tourism. The Cherokee Nation has a rich history in the 3rd District of Tennessee, and I'm grateful to be engaged in the process to safeguard their story. I strongly urge members of both chambers to understand the importance of the Cherokee tribal land preservation and support H.R. 548 so that it may be brought to President Biden's desk in a timely manner. Thank you, and I yield back.
Madam Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I'm prepared to close. I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves, and the gentlewoman from New Mexico is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would just like to compliment the sponsors' explanation of the benefits that this bill will bring. One, we've heard a little bit of the great history that lies within Tennessee and of the resilience of the Eastern Band of Cherokee as they have maintained their identity to the land, and that their use of the land will further assist the members of this wonderful country of ours to learn a bit more about that history, to learn a bit more about the life that is breathed into the statues that we surround ourselves with here in the People's House. Madam Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and we are prepared to close.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support the legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I would like to thank the gentleman from Tennessee for introducing this bill again, and I appreciate his tireless work on it. And I thank the gentlelady from New Mexico and the minority support on this piece of bipartisan legislation. In closing, I will say that H.R. 548 is a common sense bill that facilitates greater control for the Eastern Band of Cherokee over their sacred and historic homelands in Tennessee. It ensures the protection of their timeless heritage, culture, and tradition, and gives them the opportunity to memorialize the history and culture of the Cherokee people. The tribe has worked with the Tennessee Valley Authority for more than 3 decades, and this legislation is way past overdue. I again thank Mr. Fleshman for his leadership in fulfilling a vital constituent service. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 548? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 423, the Paula Band of Mission Indians Land Transfer Act of 2023.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 423, a bill to take certain land located in San Diego County, California, into trust for the benefit of the Paula Band of Mission Indians and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Westerman, and the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Fernandez, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 423, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection, the gentleman's recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, H.R. 423, the Paula Band of Mission Indians Land Transfer Act, introduced by my good friend from California, Congressman Issa, places approximately 721 acres of land the Paula Band of Mission Indians currently owns into trust. The Paula Band of Mission Indians are in the Southern California town of Paula, with the reservation totaling approximately 12,000 acres. While the tribal economy is largely supported by agricultural enterprises, the tribe also operates a 4,000 square foot Class III casino and resort. In the early 1990s, San Diego County voters approved a plan to establish the Gregory Canyon Landfill Project on a 1,700-acre parcel of land along State Route 76 west of the Paula Band's reservation. Plans for development of the landfill ceased when the original owner of the property fell into bankruptcy in 2014. A successor company began exploring other development opportunities and began meeting with the tribe to sell a portion of the land to the tribe for cultural preservation, as it contains cultural sites and components meaningful to the Paula Band. In 2016, 721 acres were purchased by the tribe. Paula Band Chairman Robert Smith testified to Congress that these acres were historically occupied by Native peoples and is the site of an ancestral village, rock art paintings, and ancient artifacts. H.R. 423 does not affect any current land and water rights, nor does it impact any rights of way or rights of use that are currently permitted. The bill also prohibits any gaming pursuant to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act on these lands. I want to thank Congressman Issa for his leadership on this issue. I support the bill, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from New Mexico is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to be on the floor of the People's House once again in support of this bill as we hope to pass it out of the House. It passed in the 117th Congress, and I have great expectations that it will do so again. H.R. 423, the Paula Band of Mission Indians Land Transfer Act, introduced by Representative Issa from California, will direct, as noted, the transfer of approximately 721 acres of land into trust for the Paula Band of Mission Indians. The Paula Band is located in northern San Diego County with 918 enrolled tribal members. Members of the Paula Band belong to the Cupeño and Luiseño tribes, who were forced together by Spanish Franciscan missions during the 1800s. The Paula Band recently purchased the property that includes the remaining portion of Gregory Mountain that is not on the existing Paula Band reservation and other sacred and culturally significant sites in Gregory Canyon. The land was purchased to protect and preserve Gregory Mountain, Medicine Rock, and other sites considered sacred by Luiseño tribes. Taking land into trust is an integral part of the government-to-government relationship between the United States and tribal governments. By maintaining tribal lands, tribal governments can protect and preserve their ancestral homelands or sacred sites considered culturally significant. This bill takes those 721 acres into trust for the benefit of the Paula Band to ensure that the sacred sites and cultural history located on those lands will be honored and appropriately safeguarded. As noted, it also stipulates that current land and water rights are not affected by its enactment, nor is there any effect on any rights of way or rights of use as currently permitted. As I'd like to point out that the two bills that we are considering on the floor today have significance beyond the acreage that is being transferred. As noted earlier, the United States has moved from an era where it systematically pushed Native Americans off their ancestral lands through treaties that were broken, as we heard about in the bill we considered earlier, into ever smaller territories of reservation land. There was an effort to try to destroy tribal culture, and I quote, kill the Indian to save the man, end quote. It has taken far too long, but Congress has finally recognized that tribal nations will not and cannot be vanquished out of existence, and that previous policies were pushing our indigenous nations and tribes into extreme poverty. The 1934 Indian Reorganization Act recognized that allowing tribes to reacquire land and place it into trust was key to the future prosperity of tribes and essential for them to maintain the culturally significant areas that are central to their identity, religion, and beliefs. It has not been an easy path forward since then, but Congress has repeatedly adopted laws that also recognize and strengthen tribal self-governance and sovereignty. Today's bills are a continuity of this recognition. I want to take this moment to thank Chairman Westerman for bringing these two bipartisan bills to the House floor for passage in the first few weeks of our legislative business in the People's House. I often note that the Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs, previously known as the Subcommittee for Indigenous Peoples, is some of the most bipartisan work in the House. It is extremely important work that we do for millions of Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians who rely on Congress to act consistent with the trust responsibility we owe tribal nations and peoples. Congress must legislate on issues regarding criminal jurisdiction, health and education funding, and so much more. Each member of this body represents Native Americans, and many of us represent one or more of the 574 federally recognized tribes. In some districts, like mine, they represent a significant portion of the population, and in many districts, tribes are major drivers of the economy. Approximately 56 million acres of land are held in trust for tribes and individuals, and they are proud stewards of the natural resources on those lands. Last week, one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle belittled this important congressional work by calling it similar to naming post offices. Such a statement does not recognize the importance of our work on Congress on tribal issues. In contrast, Chairman Westerman's presentation of these bills today demonstrates his commitment and leadership on tribal issues. Once again, thank you, Chairman Westerman, for recognizing how important our work is for tribal nations and peoples. I support this bill. I thank Representative Issa for bringing it once again to Congress and to the floor of the House, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the sponsor of the bill, the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Chairman. Madam Speaker, I spoke on this a year ago or 2 years ago, and not much has happened except more time has passed since this land was taken from this tribe. I represent 21 tribes in my congressional district. I believe that when I come to the floor, people look and say, well, you're always representing tribal issues. I represent the issues that became an issue when Ulysses S. Grant recognized that what he had done wrong to tribes, and we began the process over 100 years ago of turning around that challenge. As the ranking member mentioned, in 1934, we passed significant legislation. Much has happened since that time. One of the things that has happened is here on the House floor, we talk about CBO scoring. And I want to touch on that today, which I didn't do a year ago. CBO says this has a cost. Yes, when we move land into trust, when we move it into federal ownership, it loses property tax. So there is a small cost. This is not a cost objected to by my county or any of the surrounding cities. The Native American tribes in my district have more than compensated from the revenues they earn to the community, and they have been good stewards. This land failed to even qualify as a landfill over decades. This is land that to many would be considered not usable. It has water challenges that the tribe will be spending time and money making sure that they prevent the runoff, that they preserve. They have antiquity on this site. They will be investing in that. But yes, a few members, mostly in my own party last year, failed to vote for this because they said, well, it's an unfunded mandate. It costs a little money. Yes, it costs money to transfer things into the federal hands because we lose a little bit of revenue. But over 100 years ago, far over that, actually during the Spanish time, this land was taken from a people, and there was no compensation. So as we put it back, I would ask each of the members who considered not voting for it a year ago to reconsider, to consider that every piece of every objection other than that small one has been taken care of. The tribe will be a better steward of the land than it is now. The land will be better preserved and will be used in a way that certainly, if you can't qualify as a landfill, it's not exactly the land everybody's looking for. The reality is the Paula Band has taken what they have earned over the years in agriculture and from their gaming concession, and they are putting it back into putting together their ancestral land. I have another tribe that we're working on that is trying to simply get their graveyard back into trust. We will have the same challenge that they'll say, but the graveyard might have an economic cost when it goes into federal land. So I expect this bill to pass. It passed in the last Congress. But I would hope that all of my members would look very carefully and say, you know, not all transfers are the same. None of them are the same as naming a post office, although naming a post office after a fallen hero is not without its own merit. So I thank the chairman and ranking member. I hope that my thoughts, in addition to the kind words said by both sides, will convince us to be united this year. This is an important piece of legislation for a people who have done everything we've asked them to do and more. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his tireless advocacy on behalf of his constituents, and particularly the Paula Band in this instance. I know he's worked on this more than just this year, and I do urge adoption of the bill. I have no further requests for time. I'm prepared to close and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Arkansas reserves. The gentlewoman from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you, Representative Issa, for that great summary of the importance of this land to the Paula Band and the fact that we will actually probably see some economic benefit once they show, because they know how to be good stewards of the land, and they know what they're going to be doing with this land rather than letting it sit in the condition it does now. I have no further requests for time, and we are also prepared to close. And I urge my colleagues to support the legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 423 is common sense legislation, just like the previous bill that we looked at, and it will enable the Paula Band of Mission Indians to protect their sacred land and ensure the protection of the tribe's timeless heritage, culture, tradition, and history. I again thank my colleague, Mr. Issa, for his leadership and for filling a vital constituent service. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 423? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 302, the Energy Cyber Security University Leadership Act of 2023, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 302, a bill to direct the Secretary of Energy to establish a program to provide financial assistance to graduate students and postdoctoral researchers pursuing certain courses of study relating to cybersecurity and energy infrastructure and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Ross, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extemporaneous material on H.R. 302, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 302, the Energy Cybersecurity University Leadership Act of 2023, led by Representative Ross and Representative Carey. Cyber attacks from foreign adversaries on the U.S. energy sector present a major and constantly evolving threat to our national security, energy independence, and global competitiveness. Multiple attacks over the past years have shown us that whether it's our liquefied natural gas industry, our electric grid, or even our national laboratories, all critical U.S. energy assets can be attractive targets for adversarial cyber campaigns. Troublingly, many of these cyber attacks are just preparations for future operations. As the FBI, the CISA, and other security agencies have warned, the CCP is using smaller attacks now to provide inroads so they can inflict major damage in our energy infrastructure in the future. The threats to our energy cybersecurity have only increased recently due to several factors, like the war in the Ukraine, increased aggression from the CCP, and the development of new energy technologies and grid modernization practices. To protect our energy sector, we need to take a whole-of-government approach, and the Department of Energy plays a central role in planning for and countering these attacks. H.R. 302 is one way to support DOE's energy cybersecurity mission. This is important and bipartisan legislation that will help address expanding vulnerabilities in our energy sector by strengthening the next generation of our energy cybersecurity workforce. I'd like to thank my colleague, Representative Ross, for reintroducing this timely bill, and Representative Carey for joining her as the Republican lead on this bipartisan effort. On the Science Committee, energy cybersecurity initiatives have long been a bipartisan priority. H.R. 302 is just the beginning of our work on this issue in the 118th Congress. I pledge to continue working with you all to pass legislation that will keep the U.S. energy sector safe, reliable, and competitive for years to come. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time. Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the Energy Cybersecurity University Leadership Act of 2023. A reintroduced version of this bill, along with Representative Carey. The House passed this bill overwhelmingly in a bipartisan fashion during the 117th Congress. As all members know, the United States has witnessed an alarming rise in cybersecurity threats and attacks against our energy infrastructure. My home state of North Carolina is no exception. In May of 2021, a disastrous cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline caused the company to halt all pipeline operations, leading to panic buying of gasoline and diesel fuel across my home state. Roughly 2/3 of North Carolina's gas stations ran out of fuel, including 70% of gas stations in Raleigh, the largest city in my district. Our constituents rely on dependable energy sources for their lives and their livelihoods, and we cannot afford continued exposure to these types of attacks. The Energy Cybersecurity University Leadership Act, a bipartisan bill I co-led with Congressman Kerry, and I'm pleased to do again, will help address this vulnerability. Our bill will confront growing cyber threats against our country's critical energy infrastructure by making real investments in a strong and diverse workforce that's ready to meet the challenges we face. It will provide financial assistance to support graduate students studying the convergence of cybersecurity and energy infrastructure, in addition to providing hands-on traineeship experience at our national laboratories and utilities. It will also expand the Department of Energy's outreach to HBCUs, minority-serving institutions, and tribal colleges. I represent much of the Research Triangle, home to institutions and universities that are propelling our nation's innovation in cybersecurity and clean energy. From NC State to UNC Charlotte to the west, to Shaw, St. Augustine's, and Wake Tech, this legislation will better equip our brilliant students and researchers in North Carolina and beyond to tackle the changing cybersecurity landscape. I want to thank Ranking Member Lofgren and Chairman Lucas for their leadership in bringing forth this bill, not just this session, but the session before. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 302, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Kerry.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 302, the Energy Cybersecurity University Leadership Act of 2023. Reliable energy infrastructure is critical to our national security and our economic well-being. With the rising number of threats and attacks on energy grid, this bipartisan common sense legislation will help our country avoid large-scale power outages due to cyber attacks on our critical infrastructure. The Energy Cybersecurity University Leadership Act directs the Secretary of Energy to provide financial assistance to graduate students and postdoctoral researchers studying the convergence of cybersecurity and energy infrastructure. This financial assistance is in the form of fellowships, scholarships, and research and development projects will prepare the next generation to address the cyber attacks on our energy infrastructure that our nation will inevitably face. These graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, will have the opportunity to study and train at our national laboratories, giving them the proper experience, the tools to be successful in protecting our energy grid as they enter into the workforce. With the war in Europe, the rising threat of China, the record high energy prices over the last couple of years, it is more important than ever to invest in the protection of energy infrastructure, and this legislation is a step in the right direction. I would like to thank Congresswoman Ross for her work on this important legislation, as well as Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Lofgren for bringing the bill to the floor for consideration. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this important bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Ross, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm prepared to close, and I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, again, I want to thank Chairman Lucas for his leadership and my colleague, Congressman Kerry, for his support of this. We have worked very closely together again in the last Congress and early in this Congress on this priority issue. This is a common sense, bipartisan bill that will address critical vulnerabilities in our national energy infrastructure. We need a strong workforce that's ready to protect our existing energy infrastructure and build the safe, resilient energy infrastructure of the future. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves yields back. And
Madam
the gentleman
Speaker,
from Oklahoma is
I yield
recognized.
myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's never been a more critical issue to ensure the cybersecurity of our nation's energy sector. H.R. 302 will help develop the most important long-term weapon we have in our arsenal against cyber attacks, a highly skilled and informed American workforce. It's bipartisan, forward-looking legislation, which is why it passed the House on suspension last year. I urge my colleagues to support this bill once again, and I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 302 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative,
Madam Speaker.
the gentleman from Oklahoma is
With
recognized.
that, I respectfully ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.
The House will be in order. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order: the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 302 and agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal if ordered. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the remaining electronic vote will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 302 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 302, a bill to direct the Secretary of Energy to establish a program to provide financial assistance to graduate students and postdoctoral researchers pursuing certain courses of study relating to cybersecurity and energy infrastructure and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 357, the nays are 56. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, objection, the title is amended. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the journal stands approved.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. The Chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
The House will be in order. Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to recognize a fallen hero from New York's 17th District, Yorktown Police Captain Kenneth Scroy. Captain Scroy passed away suddenly on January 2nd after fighting a brief illness. He was a model police officer and a humble family man. He was a model police officer and a humble family man. He graduated from the Police Academy in 2007, serving as a deputy sheriff in Dutchess County. He then served as a member of the Yorktown Police Department with dignity, honor, and a compelling sense of duty for almost 13 years. His loss has been a profound one felt by the Yorktown community, his fellow officers, and his family. The town of Yorktown recently renamed their police department after him in honor of his service and sacrifice on behalf of the people of Yorktown. Captain Scroy is survived by his wife Anne, a classmate of mine at Manhattan College, and 2 young children. My prayers are with them as they grieve his loss, and my office stands ready to assist them in any way that we can. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
First, I'd like to acknowledge my new friends from North Carolina. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to praise a great small business in my district. Schneider Hardware in West Orange, New Jersey, celebrates its 100th anniversary this year. It is one of the last full-service independent hardware stores in the state of New Jersey, and it is located right in downtown West Orange in my district. Schneider Hardware is the oldest business still in operation in Essex County, and it specializes in helping owners repair their older homes that populate my district. It was started by Isidore Schneider in 1923. Today, Isidore's grandsons, Roger and Gerald, are the 3rd generation to run the store, and they help residents with everything from plumbing issues to repairing lawnmowers. So congratulations again to Schneider Hardware. It is a shining example of the importance of small businesses to local communities. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the legendary college football coach Mark Richt for his induction into the College Football Hall of Fame. Mark Richt coached the Bulldogs for 15 seasons and amassed a 145-51 record. He went on to win 2 SEC championships and multiple division titles. His lengthy tenure saw numerous iconic moments in Georgia football history. After leaving the University of Georgia, Richt became the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. He coached there for 3 seasons, which included an Orange Bowl appearance. Mark Richt has been known for his off-the-field work just as much as for his on-the-field work. He has partnered with numerous nonprofit organizations throughout the years. In 2021, Coach Richt revealed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He has faced that challenge, as he has with all in his life, with courage and a deep abiding faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Congratulations, Coach Richt, for your storybook career. You have forever changed the lives of many young men, of UGA athletics, and of college football. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Judy Handler. Judy was born in Romania in 1935. After an upbringing fractured by World War II, Judy and her family fled the post-war communist regime, escaping through Europe to Israel. Judy's arduous childhood taught her the power of human compassion, something her family says
saved her life more than once. Judy then came to the United States and quickly found the love of her life, Dr. Jerry Handler. The couple married and moved to California, where they spent 65 years making San Diego their home. But the thing that Judy was most proud of was the loving family she built with her husband. Having extended her heart so fully to her family and community, it is no wonder that Judy is deeply missed. I send my condolences to Jerry and the family, and I honor her courage, curiosity, and compassion. May her memory be a blessing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Haiti is descending into chaos, Mr. Speaker. These folks just lost their democratically elected government, and the violent gangs, which were already running rampant in the country, have basically taken over the country. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the poorest countries in the world. Its people are starved, scared, and terrorized. Why are the world leaders not paying more attention? Where's the United Nations? They're not doing anything. They're not sending any peacekeepers. We sent close to $100 billion to Ukraine since Russia invaded. Of course, I support Ukraine's fight for freedom. I don't support sending them all our money, but we shouldn't be its primary sponsor. We shouldn't be hypocritical in how we help countries around the world, Mr. Speaker. What are we going to do if China invades our allies in Taiwan? Do we have a plan? Heck no, we don't have a plan. We need to be smarter with where we send our money and aid. We need a consistent plan that puts Americans' interests first and addresses foreign conflict. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening to recognize the young people from North Carolina who've joined us and to introduce the Restoring Communities Left Behind Act. During my years as a city planner, before coming to Congress, I witnessed firsthand that fostering economic development in our communities requires strong local leadership. The involvement of neighborhood champions who know their neighborhoods block by block is essential. This legislation would direct $5 billion toward programs for homeowner rehabilitation assistance, weatherization, improved accessibility for seniors and people with disabilities, refinancing, and property tax relief. It will help restore quality housing, including in the rural communities and cities that I represent, such as Toledo, Sandusky, and Defiance. These locations have suffered from decades of job losses, outsourcing, recessions, and chronic underinvestment. Congress must serve as a partner to our on-the-ground organizations, local leaders who know what resources are needed and where, and how best to deploy them to revive their neighborhoods. And that is why the Restoring Communities Left Behind promotes local control and capacity building for economic development. These investments will repair homes, stimulate economic growth, and revitalize communities at a time when our nation needs affordable housing. I urge all my colleagues to support the Restoring Local Communities Act. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I was home over the weekend and saw a lot of folks in the district, and they're baffled by the handling of this Chinese spy balloon situation. Regular folks are wondering, why in the world was this thing handled or not handled the way it was? Why was it allowed to travel across the entire of North American continent through the NORAD system, from Alaska through Canada, down through our Midwestern states, and finally exiting at Carolina? Why wasn't another way found to bring the balloon down slowly? Maybe just a couple of bullet holes in the balloon itself instead of allegedly $1 million missile hitting the spy array, so there's not going to be any evidence as it got dumped into the ocean. There's a lot of questions to be answered about this, and we're not getting very good answers out of the military, out of the White House. Now, tomorrow night, the president's going to be standing about 10 feet away from this spot right here. I hope he has some really good answers on what our air defense system looks like in this country, how much spying is allowed to go on by balloons, for crying out loud. We know the satellites are up there and stuff,
But this is a breach of the trust of our country, and we're looking foolish around the world by allowing this to happen. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Oregon seek recognition?
I rise to address the House for 1 minute and seek to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize my first Mental Health Monday. 731,000 adults in Oregon have a mental health condition. 731,000. Our friends, neighbors, colleagues, family members are struggling, and we in Congress have an obligation to find solutions to their struggles. That's why I'm dedicating my Monday to mental health. For too long, we've allowed stigma to shame people into silence, and that silence has cost lives. It's my hope that by raising awareness, we can make strides in care, treatment, and recovery for those struggling with their mental health. Today is also the first Monday of Black History Month, so I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the troubling disparity in mental health care for the Black community. Lack of access to culturally responsive care makes treatment inaccessible to too many Black and brown individuals, and Congress must work to bridge that gap. I hope you'll join me for future Mental Health Mondays as we work to break new ground on this very important issue. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Chinese spy balloon may not have been the first, and it may not be the last. It's interesting how the Chinese can characterize an outright spy balloon of some sort and suggest it's only trying to find out the weather, whether we have sunny days or not. But I rise to support H.R. 302 that provided for establishment of a program to provide financial assistance to graduate students and postdoctoral researchers pursuing certain courses of study related to cybersecurity and energy infrastructure and other purposes. I'm on the Cybersecurity Committee. I cannot tell you how important it is to develop a modern 21st century workforce and to develop the investment to give us the future generations of scientists and researchers critical for our new age of digitalization and increased security threats nationally and internationally. This is not going to be the end. It is simply the beginning. And it is important for us as Americans to have that group of workforce that are entrenched in cybersecurity, protecting the American national security. It's important to recruit these young people, and I look forward to participating with our universities in Houston on recruiting a new cybersecurity workforce. I yield back.
The chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Larson of Connecticut for today and the balance of the week.
Without objection, the request is granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ivey, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor this CBC Special Order Hour with Member Chair Horsford, the chairman of the CBC, and Ms. Kamlager of California. For the next 60 minutes, we have a chance to speak directly to the American people on issues of great importance to the Congressional Black Caucus, Congress, the constituents we represent, and all Americans. Tonight, we will be speaking on the death of Tyre Nichols. Mr. Horton. Mr. Speaker, I yield to myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise today after the horrifying murder of yet another young black man at the hands of police, outraged because nothing has worked. They need more police training, we said, but so-called elite squads like Scorpion already require extra training over and above the basics. They need more diversity, we said, but every single one of the 5 officers we saw mercilessly beat an unarmed and compliant Tyree Nichols was black just like him. They need more accountability, we said, but even the advent of body cams hasn't stopped officers from pummeling our sons and sometimes our daughters to death over mere traffic infractions. Just throw in a few shouts of "stop resisting" to try and fool our eyes from believing what we're clearly seeing. We tried all those things, more training, more diversity, more accountability, and yet Tyree Nichols is dead. He was dragged out of his car and attacked by a swarm of men twice his size, exhausting themselves, and then coming back to beat him again. Reforming these so-called elite squads is not enough. It's time to end them altogether. These units often attract and recruit young, aggressive officers drawn to the prospect of less supervision. They slap an intimidating name onto the team, like Scorpion or Stress or Crash, which in the 90s stood for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums, because these units aren't about forging bonds with the communities they serve. They're about instilling fear. They descend on low-income, usually minority neighborhoods, looking to make pretextual stops in search of drugs or guns. That's not a secret. It's a tactic sanctioned by the Supreme Court itself. An officer can stop anyone for whatever reason he wants. He doesn't even need to know which law he suspects you of breaking, so long as he can develop a reason after the fact. Reasons that are often minor, trivial, and unrelated, like a busted taillight or a partially obscured traffic tag, are sufficient for these stops. This is a formal policy in police departments across the country. For example, the New York City Police Department admittedly trained its officers to, quote, "stop and question first, develop reasonable suspicion later," close quote. What results is a constant state of alert. Black and brown males worry about being pulled over for a minor traffic stop that can spiral out of control. Police officers worry because they are understandably taught that there is nothing more dangerous than to walk up to a stranger's driver's side window at night. Both sides of the confrontation are on edge. And for what? So that an officer can peek inside the car for contraband and ask for so-called consent to search the car, despite many drivers feeling like they can't say no. These pretextual stops aren't bearing much fruit. A study found that stop and frisk searches in New York City produce drugs or guns in less than 2% of the cases. What it does breed is contempt between the police and the people they're sworn to protect. African Americans are 5 times more likely to have their vehicles searched, and a black man has to hit the age of 50 before his chance of being pulled over lowers to that of a young white man. As the father of 5 black sons, I'm all too familiar with the talk parents are duty-bound to give their black and brown children about how to de-escalate interactions with the police. As a former prosecutor, I saw firsthand how communities can be ravaged by fear in the face of violent crime and threats to public safety, but those communities should not also be afraid of the men and women in uniform whose job it is to defend them. Police can't investigate crime if victims and witnesses don't trust them enough to come forward. These squads running roughshods on our streets are contributing to a breakdown in that trust. It isn't leading to better results, but it is contributing to the unjustified killing of our kids. The Memphis police chief, Saralyn Davis, did the right thing by shutting down the Scorpion unit, but we must not wait until the next murder of an innocent man gets national attention before we shut down these roving elite squads across the country. Professor Christy Lopez, the co-chair of the DC Police Reform Commission, made the case brilliantly in a recent Washington Post editorial entitled, "Cities Should Get Rid of These Toxic Crime Units," which I will now submit to the record. Finally, I think the time has come to end pretextual stops completely. Because they are just racial profiling hiding behind legalese and little more than a subtle way to circumvent the constitutional rights of low-income black and brown males. Pretext stops allow police to stop cars, even though they lack even reasonable suspicion to think an actual crime is, has been, or is about to be committed. They allow police to pressure drivers into so-called consensual searches so that they can avoid the need to obtain a warrant to search the car. And as we've seen yet again, these pretextual stops frequently escalate into young men being killed or seriously injured, not because they broke the law, but because they've been targeted for aggressive police tactics that aren't directed at other communities. So I urge President Biden to use his executive authority to put an end to this practice at the federal level. And I urge state and local officials, mayors, police chiefs, county executives to put an end to this practice all over the country. I now recognize the Congresswoman from California, Ms. Sydney Kamlager.
Thank you. It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor this CBC Special Order Hour. It is the first of the 118th Congress and my first in this body. We have a problem, America, a big problem. The problem is the rampant disregard for Black life at the hands of law enforcement. For too many years now, we have seen snuff videos, death at the hands of police, of our Black men and women, our Black boys and girls. These videos become dissected, the victim in death is persecuted as a way to justify excessive force, and it goes on and on and on. The more this happens, the more desensitized we become. And as a culture, we enter into a culture of deflection, deflecting accountability, deflecting truth, deflecting uncomfortable conversations about the value of Black life. Why are we always looking for the perfect victim? Probably wouldn't be victims if they weren't Black. We certainly spend a lot of time victim blaming, deflecting, not talking about the kind of public safety all of us should have and how we reimagine it in a way that makes it safe for everyone. It is sad to say, but police shootings in Black communities has become as American as baseball. In baseball, you have something called balks. Pitchers commit balks, and the lower the balk number, the better your success. In law enforcement, we also have something called balks, although it means something different. B, background, A, age, L, lethal force, K, knowledge, S, seriousness of a crime. And once again, the lower the number of deaths, the higher the use of balks, something American, something we should be discussing. How can we incorporate balks more deeply into our public safety system so that all lives can be saved? What we are seeing with these shootings is un-American. I would also argue that it is unconstitutional because shootings like this are equivalent to summary executions. Law enforcement has become judge, jury, and executioner. Meanwhile, the 14th Amendment declares that we all have a right to due process. But these shootings have stolen due process from so many men and women in our Black communities. These videos, once again, that we see, the images, as horrific as they are, have become symbols of today and what Black America has to experience. You know, the symbols of today become the reality of tomorrow. And the recordings of these shootings are important because they keep us honest, but they also become symbols of police brutality, police violence. We've gotten used to these symbols, and that's a problem. This is Black History Month, but you would be flawed in thinking that the issue of police shootings and police violence is a Black issue, or that it's not an issue because it's not happening in your community. It is an American issue, and it must be addressed. I think we should be talking more deeply about the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, and how we reimagine law enforcement. When law enforcement officers are trained to understand and take all of these pieces into account, we see much better outcomes of police interaction. Once again, I would just like to share some of the symbols that are propelling us towards the values of tomorrow. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, we must carry their memories with us as we fight to address the epidemic of police violence. We have an obligation to the family of Tyree Nichols, beaten to death in Memphis, to the family of Takar Smith, shot 7 times by the LAPD while on his knees, to the family of Oscar Leon Sanchez, cornered and shot while suffering a mental health crisis, to the family of Anthony Lowe, shot in the back multiple times by LAPD, I might add, a double amputee and someone living in a wheelchair, and to the family of Keenan Anderson, tased to death during a routine traffic stop. I am honored that Dominique Hamilton, Keenan's fiance, will join me tomorrow for the 2023 State of the Union address. Her bravery shines through. I hope that we can all take inspiration from her. We must do more to hold our law enforcement officers accountable and stop this epidemic of state-sanctioned murder. Thank you, and I yield back my time to Congressman Ivey.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to my colleague, Ms. Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas.
Let me thank the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Maryland, Congressman Ivey, and the distinguished gentlelady from the great state of California, Congresswoman Kamlager Dove, for their leading such an important special order. Let me also thank Chairman Horsford for immediately capturing the pain and sentiment of the American people. And when I say that, I am speaking of all of the American people, Mrs. Speaker, because I believe more than any part of our constitutional rights, the right to be free and safe in this nation is one that Americans crave for. No matter whether they are in the beauty of Utah, in the richness of Mississippi, in the smart urban life of New York, on the beauty of the West Coast, Republican or Democrat, independent, and any other affiliation, we are concerned about safety. And the reason is because safety involves the coming and going of our family members, our children. For any of us who've ever been parents, we have always had with a little trepidation when that little one leaves the home for the first time in that pre-K or kindergarten, that they would be safe. We are appalled at the unsafe conditions that we've faced in our schools today. Uvalde, Sandy Hook, Santa Fe, and beyond. We know that violence permeated those safe spaces. At the same time, I think, as I thank the Congressional Black Caucus for its recognition that as it speaks here on the floor today, it is embracing an American issue, public safety. I will be looking for Republicans that are going to admit that even as we want those who protect and serve to go home to their families, we cannot deny American mothers and fathers the right to expect their young people to come home. And we can walk, if I might say, and chew gum at the same time. We can uplift the urgency of importance of law enforcement at all levels, first responders, EMTs, firefighters, as I do, a member of the Fire Caucus, former chair of the Crime Committee, now ranking member. We have worked in the House Judiciary Committee and worked with the Congressional Black Caucus on major legislation that deals with answering all of those concerns. I would be remiss to think that there are not Republicans who will not join us in this whole idea of crafting a 21st century approach to police-community relations. There is no one that could in any way accept the murder of a man on the streets in video, as was my constituent's brother. Felonious Floyd is here, and he will join me at the State of the Union. His brother, George Floyd, Big George, who grew up in CUNY Homes, was everybody's friend. Their mother and their family was everybody's family. They opened their doors to children who may not have a good hot meal, and they gave it to them. And yet, like every American who leaves their hometown and looks for a greener space, as what he looked at in Minneapolis, Minnesota, he found a deadly end. No one could accept that, and the reason, Mr. Speaker, that I know that is because the people who took to the streets nonviolently and walked shoulder to shoulder with us were from all walks of life. And out of that was crafted a combination of Republican-supported ideas, things that were embraced in the Trump executive order, now embraced in the Biden executive order, dealing with a reconstruct of police-community relationships, which would include the idea of making sure that random stops that caught Tyre Nichols in the throngs of violence that lasted for an hour on videotape, or the tragedy of Breonna Taylor, or the tragedy of Eric Garner, or the tragedy in the early stages under color of law, Trayvon Martin, in someone who was supposed to be a civil patrol, and a young boy lost his life, or the young boy in Cleveland, Ohio, who lost his life at age 12 or 13 years old, or the cafeteria worker who lost his life, or Pam Turner, who lost her life, or Sandra Bland, who lost her life. And so we can construct, under the Constitution, a reasonable response to traffic stops included in the early premise of legislation. We can deal with the right way to, in essence, address a human being and chokeholds when you are not in danger, basically, are without place. No knocks that come to, in essence, a wrong person's home, or someone entering the wrong home. All of that is reasonable to deal with in a new construct of which we hope President of the United States will join us in a bipartisan, bicameral effort. And that would include training as well, accountability as well. It would include dealing with mental health concerns or violence intervention, as well as the necessity of wearing body cams, which were the element of truth and have been. I was very proud in the small cities that I represent, Mr. Speaker, to be able to provide grant money for our cities to get body cams, small cities that don't have it. Just think if we pass legislation that allows all departments to seek body cams for truth for all that are involved. And so I rise today to capture the essence of the importance of this Congressional Black Caucus special order, because it is laying the footprints for the day tomorrow, as the President speaks to the nation on many issues. But there is no doubt, as someone who went to the funeral of Tyre Nichols, as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, to be able to say that we can do this together. Public safety is an American issue. It is American families' issue. It is the issue of those who are entrusted to protect and serve. It is the issue of local government, state government. It's the issue of moms and dads. It's the issue of teenagers and young families and senior citizens. It does not leave one person untouched. And I believe that the work that was done in the last years with legislation that carried the name of George Floyd, has the ability to embrace a wide perspective of diversity and new changes and inspiration, and of course working as one would with all persons concerned and even respecting the other body. But the Congressional Black Caucus has taken up the light, and I'm grateful for that leadership and look forward that we continue to work, because we are not the nation of laws and values if we do not adhere as a nation that every person deserves the dignity of their humanity and does not deserve under the Constitution to be denied their equal protection of the law, their due process in the workings between law and community. So I thank my very important co-leaders of the special orders. I wish them well. I know that they will be a dynamic team. I had the privilege of doing this in the last session, and I can tell you, you will have a moment of joy every time you rise to this floor and are joined by the esteemed members of the Congressional Black Caucus, each and every one of them with their own special story, and we do make a difference, and we can change lives, and we can change laws. With that, I yield back to the distinguished gentleman.
Thank you, and I would like to thank the distinguished gentlelady for her powerful and extemporaneous comments. I think it's a representation of the powerful leadership she's provided over the years and will continue to provide in the future. Now I would like to yield to my colleague, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Stephen Horsford of Nevada.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, it is an honor to join my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus on the floor tonight for what is the first special order hour of the 118th Congress. I want to first acknowledge our chairs for special orders this evening, the gentleman from Maryland, Congressman Glenn Ivey, and the gentlewoman from California, Congresswoman Sidney Kamlager-Dove. This hour provides all of us as members an important opportunity to come to the floor and to discuss issues vital to Black Americans. And we will use that time to do just that tonight. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow, during the State of the Union, it is my hope that President Biden will be able to put a personal touch on the story of Tyre Nichols. The brutal beating of Tyre Nichols resulted in his death, and it is a reminder that we have a long way to go in solving systemic police violence in America. We and his parents want America to know who Tyre was. Tyre was a son. He was a father. He loved skateboarding and sunsets. He enjoyed photography. He had a purpose and a passion and a lifelong opportunity ahead of him, but that was taken. Now, no one in our nation should fear interacting with the police officers in any of our communities. Sadly, many Black and brown people do every single day. I want to be absolutely clear. We all want to be safe, and we want our communities to be safe. We don't want to end policing. We want to stop bad policing. All of us should agree that bad policing has no place in any community in America. That is why we need to address the public health epidemic of public safety that disproportionately affects our communities. I want to commend our colleague, Senator Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, who issued this statement, and I quote, "We have been here too many times before, and we cannot continue down this path. This man was beaten by the power of the state, by men entrusted with protecting his safety. We must unite against this blatant disregard for human life, especially from those whom have been trusted with immense power and responsibility for our communities," unquote. Mr. Speaker, Democrats and some Republicans agree. This is an important issue that must be addressed. Something must change to prevent further unnecessary deaths. In the coming weeks, my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus and I are engaging with leaders in our community and right here in the U.S. Capitol. We are working with the President, with the Vice President, with the Senate, and our House colleagues on the issue of public safety, policing, and justice, which is what we need action on now. For every mom, dad, son, and daughter, it's imperative that we tackle this issue with legislative solutions, with executive actions, and community-based results. That is how we put an end to the pattern of Black lives being taken at the hand of law enforcement, whether it is during a traffic stop, walking in a park, or sleeping in their home. So again, thank you to my colleagues that are here on the floor with us to speak tonight, and thank you to Representatives Ivey and Kamlager-Dove for leading on this effort of special order tonight and for the work that we will continue to do in the days, weeks, and months to come. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your commitment and your strength on this issue. I would now like to yield to my colleague, Representative Moore, the gentlewoman from Wisconsin.
Thank you so very, very much. And I want to thank the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Mr. Horsford, and of course, our esteemed colleagues who are leading this special order, Ms. Representative Kamlager-Dove of California and Representative Glenn Ivey of Maryland. This is extremely important work in terms of communicating to our constituents. Tonight, I'm standing here February feeling like this is like not just Black History Month, but this is like Groundhog Day. The death of Tyre Nichols is yet another preventable death, a homicide committed by those who are hired to protect us, those who are hired to protect and serve as a mission. And you know, this is this is not an issue that can be resolved through just, hiring more diverse officers or merely providing more training. It really requires us to take a deep dive and look at the role that law enforcement plays in our community, the relationship that law enforcement has with our community, and get a better understanding of what those needs are and how those needs are not being met. And that is why the Congressional Black Caucus in both the House and the Senate have introduced the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act, because we recognize the familiar fact patterns. Although Tyre Nichols is one of the most recent incidences, it's the same fact pattern. Pretextual stops. We have no idea at this point why Tyre Nichols was stopped. That there's bias in these stops, bias against men of color, excessive force, failure to exercise de-escalation strategies, and of course, qualified immunity, really creating no incentive for police officers to exercise good judgment and to use legal police tactics. And, this problem, we've heard there are a lot of famous people who have been subjected to this police brutality, and we've heard some of those names tonight. But I just want to talk about my district. I want to talk about my community in Wisconsin. We've seen this devastation firsthand. Since 2013, 149 people in Wisconsin have been killed by violence, and with nearly all of them being shot by police officers. It's a systemic issue when it comes to police departments. People who face mental health crises, traffic violations or nonviolent offense should not be given the death penalty. Those like Joel Acevedo, who was murdered by an officer, or 17-year-old Alvin Cole, who was shot by police after leaving the mall, or 18-year-old Tyrese West, who was killed after police stopped him for not having a light on his bicycle, and 19-year-old Terry Williams, who was shot 8 times after a traffic stop, or 22-year-old Adam Trammell, who was killed in his home by police, who tasered him 18 times while he was in the shower. And 23-year-old Seville Smith, who was shot by police even after the police saw him throw his weapon away. How about 25-year-old Jay Anderson Jr., who was sitting in a parked car and was shot 5 times in the head? And a person that I actually don't understand why he is dead would have turned 40 years old January 20th, but 9 years ago, Dontre Hamilton was shot 14 times. And what was his crime? He was asleep on a public Milwaukee County park bench, unarmed. One group of cops came by, did a wellness check, saw that he was fine. Another cop came by, beating him with his baton, and when Dontre disarmed him, when 140-pound Dontre Hamilton disarmed the cop, he was shot 14 times. That police officer retired with his pension and his disability benefits for having PTSD for killing Dontre Hamilton. And guess what? Beyond those who are killed by the police, we have others who survived their violent encounters with those entrusted with public safety, but they're nonetheless scarred, like Jacob Blake in Kenosha, or my guest tomorrow for the State of the Union address, NBA basketball player Sterling Brown. Sterling Brown was an arrogant black man, I guess, who parked in a handicapped spot about 2 o'clock in the morning to go into Walgreens to get some medication. And when he came back out, the police saw his fancy car there, very consistent with his status as a high-paid individual, and asked him why he was parked at 2 a.m. within an empty parking lot in a handicapped spot. And what did Sterling Brown say? "Officer, just give me a ticket." And that led to him being tased, gun drawn on him, and the Wisconsin, Milwaukee taxpayers paying for the insult. This driving while black in a fancy car, this uppity Negro, and there was no de-escalation of police. And so this is why the Congressional Black Caucus will consistently come to this well, Mr. Speaker, and insist that we look at the elements of the George Floyd Justice Act. Because I will tell you, being black is not a crime. And therefore, it should not be a death sentence. And I would yield back to you, Ms. Kamlager-Dove.
Thank you for that powerful statement. I would like to yield to Ms. Kamlager-Dove.
Thank you, Representative Ivey. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
24 minutes.
Thank you. I would now like to yield to my colleague, Representative Johnson, the gentleman from the 4th District of Georgia.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I thank her, along with Congressman Ivey, for leading this special order hour on behalf of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus under the leadership of Chairman Steve Horsford. And tonight we are here to talk to you about a plague on America. It has to do with police violence towards black people in this country. And I'm not talking about just white police officers, but black officers also. We saw it with Tyree Nichols, a group of 5 so-called elite crime suppression unit officers who travel in unmarked cars and in plain clothes, and they're out looking for crime. And they jump out on folks. And they jumped out on Tyree Nichols. He was on his way over to his mother's house for dinner, but he never made it. And y'all saw it on TV where he was pulled over. The police were going at 100 miles an hour on him. Get out of the car, get out of the car, had guns drawn. Get on your stomach. And he complied. But because of the culture of policing with these crime suppression units and other units of police agencies across the country, he was frightened. I was frightened. He ran, and he almost made it to his mother's house, but they caught up with him, and the rest you saw with your own eyes. You can believe your lying eyes about what you saw, a horrific beating. And you also could hear what was happening in the background as the officers were talking to each other, planning on how they were going to adjust their reports to all be consistent about this guy being on drugs, and he must have been on this, that, and the other. He wouldn't comply. He wouldn't put his hands behind him. You know, they just talking to each other throughout the whole thing. This is a part of a culture, and it's something that has to be rooted out. It's happening all over the country. In my neck of the woods, DeKalb County, 2015, March, an Air Force veteran, Anthony Hill, had been to Afghanistan. His mother didn't want him to go, but he went to serve his country, and he came back. He was different, suffering from mental illness, bipolar. So in March of 2015, shortly after the situation with Michael Brown in Ferguson, shortly after that, Anthony Hill is out in his apartment complex, running around naked as a jaybird, swinging from canopies, knocking on doors. The neighbors knew him. They called the police. They called 911. They wanted some help to come for him. But instead, a police officer showed up. And when Anthony Hill did not stop coming towards the officer, he didn't tase him. He didn't hit him with his nightstick. He pulled out his 9mm, shot him twice, killed him. That was his mother's only son, her youngest child. He killed him. He was naked as a jaybird. And then he said in his report that the guy came at him and hit him, and that's why he fired. But the jury found otherwise. The officer was indicted for murder, but the jury didn't convict him for murder. They convicted him for aggravated assault and for lying, filing a false statement about what happened. Took the jury 6 days to get to the point where they could convict him of anything. And he was looking at 30 years at that point, but the judge had mercy on him. Gave him 20 to do 12 for taking the man's life. And that's how it goes throughout America. Everybody has sympathy, and I have abundant sympathy, and I love my men in blue, men and women in blue. But the culture of policing has to change. We saw why it needs to change with Tyree Nichols. And my colleagues are going to come with other examples of why it needs to change. I've given you mine. I've taken enough of your time, but I'll just leave it with this. We need to make police reform a priority. It's time to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. We did it in the House 2 or 3 times last session. Went to the Senate, couldn't get across the finish line. So we need the Senate to abandon the filibuster rule. And let's get some legislation passed, let's get voting rights passed, and let's get police reform passed. And with that, I'll yield back to my colleagues.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
Minutes.
Thank you. I would like to yield to my colleague, Representative Payne of New Jersey.
Mr. Speaker, I first want to thank Chairman Horsford for bringing this forth, this special order hour, and the gentleman from Maryland and the gentlelady from California for chairing this order hour. This special order hour focuses on the problem of police brutality, especially in Black and brown communities. And I welcome the opportunity to raise awareness for an issue that is so close to so many in my community. To the family of Tyree Nichols, I once again send my heartfelt condolences for your tragic loss. In the wake of the release of that horrifying footage that the world watched of yet again another despicable display of police brutality in this country. Our cities and streets have been plagued for decades by this senseless and unnecessary use of force by sworn officers of the law. And it has permeated the facets of Black and brown lives. In the last 10 years alone, my state of New Jersey has been home to 109 excessive force lawsuits against officers and police departments since 2012. And because of that number, I could not give you the names that were involved in these situations. As I said, 109. The profession of policing should not be costing states and local taxpayers millions of dollars each year in settlements for wrongful acts caused by those entrusted to protect and serve. I voted for the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which was legislation that would end racial profiling in law enforcement, ban chokeholds and no-knock warrants, and establish a federal standard for policing in and against African American communities. The calling card for such a bill came after thousands of Americans took to the streets in the summer of 2020 to protest the brutal murder of George Floyd and other African Americans from policing violence. For too long, many Americans were considered dangerous and violent simply because of the color of their skin. We have been witness for some time now that police officers have been allowed to violate the sanctity and privacy of African Americans while in their cars, homes, or even standing on the sidewalk. The time is now for us to create a nationwide standard for police conduct to stop police brutality against African Americans and other minorities. This is a day we have been waiting for in the Black community for a long time. And I am hopeful that we can work together in a constructive manner with my colleagues across the aisle and get this done. I am honored to be a part of the Congressional Black Caucus that has been a conscience and a voice for the American people and the conscience of this body as it continues to talk about righteousness in this nation. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back to my colleagues.
Thank you for those powerful comments. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
Gentleman has 12 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to yield to my colleague, Representative Adams of North Carolina.
Thank you very much, and I want to first of all thank Chairman Horsford and the co-hosts, anchors for this evening, gentleman from Maryland and the gentlelady from California. I do rise today to lend my testimony to the conversation about police reform, safe communities, and the value of Black lives. The brutal beating and the death of Tyre Nichols is a reminder that we do indeed have a long way to go to solve the structural racism and the systemic police violence in America. Tyre was a son, he was a father. I am a mother and a grandmother of sons and daughters. And he had a passion for skateboarding and photography, a young person with purpose, potential, and his life was ahead of him. The Congressional Black Caucus has always been the conscience of the Congress, and that's why we're pushing for reforms to our justice system, specifically regarding the actions and the conduct of law enforcement. Because no one in this nation should fear interacting with police officers in their communities, but many Black and brown people do each and every day. Everybody wants to be safe, and we want safer communities. Tyre Nichols should still be alive today. And that's why we must address the public health epidemic of police violence that disproportionately affects our communities. Senator Tim Scott, a Republican, in his quote, was absolutely right. We've got to unite against this blatant disregard, he said, for human life, especially from those whom have been entrusted with immense power and responsibility for our communities. You know, we are keenly aware that the police are asked to handle situations sometimes that they simply aren't trained for or equipped to handle. But like many CBC members, I've been there when a police beating or shooting rocked our communities. In my home of Charlotte, North Carolina, Keith Lamont Scott was having a mental health crisis when he was shot and killed by police, leading to the first major protests and demonstrations for Black lives in our community. And that doesn't absolve the officers involved of responsibility. But what it does mean is that with better training and a different approach to policing, that Keith Lamont Scott could be alive today, and he should be. Another man, Justin Carr, lost his life during the protest. Keith Lamont Scott and Justin Carr should both still be alive today. And something's got to change to prevent further unnecessary deaths, and that's why myself and the CBC have consistently supported the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and other necessary reforms. The police culture needs to change, and it needs to change right now. And that's why the CBC is actively engaged in all relevant stakeholders with the aim of developing a legislative solution that can pass Congress and ensure meaningful police accountability reforms. For every mom and dad and son and daughter, and for every Black person, it is imperative that we deal with this issue and form some legislative solutions and some executive actions and community-based results. And that's how we can put an end to this pattern of Black lives being taken at the hand of law enforcement. And so I want to just leave you with the words of Ziana Ofant, who was 9 years old when she addressed the Charlotte City Council in the wake of the Keith Lamont Scott protests in 2006, and she said, "I feel like that we're treated differently than other people. And I don't know how we're treated, just why we're treated that way just because of our color. We are black people, and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We shouldn't have to protest because y'all aren't treating us right. We do this because we need to, and we have rights. I was born and raised in Charlotte, and I never felt that way until now. And I can't stand how we're treated. It's a shame that our fathers and mothers are killed and we can't even see them anymore." End of quote. 9 years old this young lady was. The truth is clear. Children can even see it. And so I hope as the CBC continues its work, more of our colleagues will see the truth as well. I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
Gentleman has 7.5 minutes remaining.
I yield 2.5 minutes to the representative from New York, Mr. Bowman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the CBC for putting together this special order hour. I just want to start out by saying this is not just a CBC issue. We need the Tri-Caucus to be involved in this issue, and we need the Tri-Caucus to be speaking out on this issue. We also need action and courage from the Senate in terms of stopping the unnecessary killing of black people throughout our country. Tyre Nichols should be alive. Trayvon Martin should be alive. Breonna Taylor should be alive. And Tatiana Jefferson, Freddie Gray, Laquan McDonald, they all should be alive. Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, on and on and on and on. Police brutality in our country is a disease that needs to be cured. It is rooted in historical racism and systematic oppression in our country. This has to stop. Federal legislation needs to be implemented to stop it. One of the things we are asking for is simple accountability. That's all. We support law enforcement when they are doing the right thing. But when they commit a crime, they should be held accountable. They are not above the law. And what's really painful is taxpayer money pays the salary of law enforcement. Taxpayer money pays the pensions of law enforcement. Taxpayer money pays for the settlements when law enforcement is sued in court. Taxpayer money pays for the lawyers. Cities go into debt using bonds to pay settlement claims. There's a billion-dollar industry of police brutality that comes out of the pockets of taxpayers. If we are going to reach the ideals of our democracy and our Constitution, we need to stop the unnecessary killing of black people in our country. And I'll close with this. It's not just policing, it's the overall system of mass incarceration. We incarcerate more, and they're disproportionately black and brown in our country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I would like to yield to my colleague, Representative Sherfolis McCormick of Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to rise today and say a special thank you to the Congressional Black Caucus, Chairman Horsford, and also my colleagues for having this special order hour. Mr. Speaker, my heart is broken for the families of Tyre Nichols, another black man who lost his life to senseless police overreach and violence. The horrifying footage of his untimely death displayed why the United States must pass comprehensive police reform and public safety legislation. Tyre Nichols' murder occurred in Memphis, the city where Dr. King lost his life fighting for a dream that we still are reaching for today. Our country must reckon with the long-standing and fraught legacy of racism and violence against black people. Tyre Nichols, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, Tamar Rice, and so many more black men, women, and children should be alive today. Their deaths were preventable. Black Americans constantly find themselves trapped in an endless cycle of grief. 3 decades after this heinous beating of Rodney King, Black communities continue to bear the deadly consequence of a culture of policing that allows law enforcement officials to dehumanize, debase, and victimize individuals without consequences. As a mother of 2 Black children, it is heartbreaking to shoulder your kids with the responsibility of a double conscience of how you as a parent see them, but as the whole world sees them. Our Black children go from being viewed as innocent to future convicts in the eyes of society and in the eyes of those who are charged with the responsibility of protecting them. It is terrifying to know that if your child will return home after they step out that door. Mothers and fathers planning their children's funerals cannot become a standard in our great nation. It is simply unacceptable. In the 117th Congress, House Democrats introduced the George Floyd Justice Policing Act, which passed the House but failed the Senate, ultimately failing all Black families. In a humanitarian call for action, I urge the House to pass public safety legislation, and Mr. Speaker, I want to end by saying their names. Tyre Nichols, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, Tamar Rice, and so many more Black women, men, and children would be alive today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to yield the balance of our time to my colleague, Representative Sykes of Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today during the first Congressional Black Caucus Special Order of the Year to stand in solidarity with the families and loved ones in support of safety and security of American citizens. Tomorrow during the State of the Union, I will be joined by Ms. Pamela Walker, a police accountability advocate and mother of Jayland Walker, a 25-year-old unarmed Black man from Akron, Ohio, who was fatally shot 46 times by police in June of 2022. Jayland Walker was just 25 years old. He was a kind, quiet, and thoughtful young family man who regularly spent time with his mother, grandmother, and sister. He was just beginning to live his life with aspirations of starting his own business or becoming a professional wrestler. His mother described him as the son that every mother dreams of, talked about how proud she was to be his mother, and Ms. Walker is coming to the Capitol in honor of her son, demanding accountability, public safety, and change, so that her son will not have died in vain or anyone else's son. No mother should ever have to go through what Ms. Walker experienced. Despite her unimaginable grief, she has displayed unwavering strength, dignity, and perseverance. Mr. Speaker, we must re-examine our institutions, how they operate and are governed without the polarizing rhetoric that only leads to division and not solutions. Because the longer we are divided and legislation is not passed, the more lives hang in the balance, and the public safety and security is too important to play with. We need to create a level of trust where our law enforcement officers feel like they are a part of the community, and we must also take steps to improve police accountability. There is still much work to be done to restore trust between the police and the communities they serve, and that's why I felt it was important to have Ms. Walker join me tomorrow. Let her presence signify that enough is enough. We as a nation have reached an inflection point because too many lives have been lost. I join in my colleagues in calling for robust examination of our policing, wholesale, holistic public safety policies, and bipartisan national solutions to this issue before more lives are lost. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Representative Kamlager Dove and the Congressional Black Caucus, we thank the Speaker for this opportunity. I now yield the floor back.
The gentleman yields. What purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is in the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.